have anything that you want to expand on or stop and talk about it, just let me know. I'll pause it and you can expand. So let's see what we can do here.
Okay, so today I will once and for all debunk this vegan meme that most crops are grown for animals, for livestock, because vegans will still tell this lie over and over and over again. I constantly see this being repeated ad nauseum that most crops that are grown are for livestock. Okay, this is a total lie. This is a total falsehood, and I will prove it to you. And vegans basically say that because if they're confronted with the fact that their diet causes immense animal suffering and death, that they will blame that animal suffering and death, they will blame it on meat eaters, because according to the vegans, the livestock production uses more cropland and more crops are being grown for livestock supposedly. So therefore the crop deaths argument is null and void. But unfortunately for the vegans, most crops are grown for human consumption. Okay, and I will prove that to you. And not only that, but also that in a vegan world there would be more crops grown and more cropland being used. Okay, so let's hear from Joey Carpstrong again this argument, right?
The vast majority of cropland is grown to feed the animals you eat. So
that's a huge lie that
Yes.
Joey just told. But the vegans just drink that Kool-Aid right up without question, don't they?
Yes, and it wasn't actually that easy to find a good source on how much land is actually dedicated to human food crops versus animal feed crops. But eventually, I found actually a source that really illustrates that. You know, with this map, and
it's
but
coming up.
You know.
Yeah. Okay. I get it started again.
Any crop death, any pesticide harm, any predator shooting, any of that is magnified by huge amounts when you eat animal products. When you eat a steak, the crop deaths in a steak is magnitudes more. I can't even think of.
Okay, so that's basically the argument, right? So he blames all of the crop deaths on the animal feed. Okay, now where is this meme actually coming from that most of the crops are grown for animals? Okay, I think actually it comes from Our World and Data. Okay, especially this graph. Now this shows us the global.
Now I'm going to point out that Our World and Data is basically a Bill Gates / World Economic Forum publication. Am I right?
Yes, it's also put out by Oxford scientists, and Oxford has a long-standing relationship with Monsanto, with Bayer Monsanto, and this is the vegan go-to source, right? It just tells you something about how critically the vegan thinking is actually, and it's critical thinking is non-existent.
Non-existent. And that's why you may have noticed what I've noticed is that in many cases, this Bill Gates / WEF / Oxford New World Order science publication does actually tell the truth, but it presents it in a way that skews the numbers and tells a lie, right? But if you look behind the curtain, the data that all of these graphs and tables that this publication offers up are proven to be misleading because of the way that they present the information and their graphs.
Yeah, especially with the graph on the screen, because they say that most agricultural land is occupied by livestock or for livestock production, and then in small print that you can barely see, they say, oh, this also includes grassland. So of course this inflates the numbers, right?
Right.
But
Grassland, aka non-arable, aka
yes,
it will not support crops. Right.
exactly. And but what they also do is they cite a lot of Oxford references. So they reference, it's an Oxford publication, and they also reference a lot of Oxford research. So they're self-referential in a way, especially when it comes to
Mhm.
greenhouse gas emissions. They always refer to this Poor and Nemesek paper, which all the vegans use to say that, oh, if we went all vegan, then we would decrease land use by, I think it was 75% or so, which is total nonsense.
Total nonsense.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
Land use for food production, and it shows us the agricultural land, right? So it says here 77% for livestock agricultural land and only 23% for crops. Now this might seem that, oh, the vegans were right. Most of the agricultural land is for the animals, okay, for the livestock. However, it says here in small letters, this includes grazing land for animals. Okay? Grazing land. This is a very crucial point because this graph is actually very deceptive because they're including in that agricultural land for livestock the grazing land. And why is this important? Because most agricultural land is actually grazing land or marginal land, okay? And only 33% is arable cropland, okay?
This is a huge, huge point that you've just made. It completely destroys a large portion of the vegan lives. And,
Yes.
I've even had vegans who would claim that there's some type of conspiracy by the livestock industry to label this land as marginal or non-arable and make claims that they could grow vegan staples on a rocky cliff face.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how can you get up a combine harvester on some hill? I mean, on some rocky hill? Like how does this work, you know? And also not all soil actually uh, offers the right nutrition for all the crops to grow, and the climate is also not something that is equal, and the rainfall, you have to consider rainfall and all kinds of conditions that make it so that you cannot grow crops everywhere. I mean, it's very logical actually.
Mhm. And it's also the powers that be are using these numbers dishonestly. It's a little bit, when they talk about agricultural land, most people think of cropland. They think of, rows and rows of some type of bean or grain or vegetable. They don't think of a rocky mountainside that will not support crops at all. They don't think of that as agricultural land. But 2/3 of the world's agricultural land is not suitable for growing crops. The
Yeah.
best use of it is raising ruminant animals that will feed the soil, encourage vegetation to grow in the area, which decreases erosion, sequesters carbon into the soil. All of the things that we should be trying to do around the world right now is that's what wild animals on these non-arable plots of land were doing before agriculture ever even came along.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, the vegans always say, "Oh, animal agriculture is so inefficient." Actually, it is way more efficient than plant agriculture. And this marginal land can only be used by livestock. And not only that, but there is barely any pesticides being used on marginal land, on marginal agricultural land, on grazing land, etc. Most of the pesticides and most of the synthetic fertilizers are used on arable land, cultivated cropland. Okay. So this already shows you that our world and data is hugely biased. Okay. Now, when you actually not count in the grazing land, you get a more accurate picture. Okay. When we look at the crops. So here's a map that shows us the crops for food, feed, process, export, and other utilities, right? So, and the green color is food, and the blue color is the animal feed. Okay,
So the green is these are crops that are grown to produce items for the vegan menu, and the blue are crops that are grown specifically to feed livestock. Correct?
yeah, exactly, 100%.
Yeah.
And as you can see, what Jerry Carbstrong was just saying, oh, the vast majority of land is used for the animal feed crops. Total bullshit, as you can see.
Total. Yeah. Huge lie. Huge vegan lie. And you know when you're dealing with a dishonest vegan, when you show them this, but they go back to telling that same lie again and again and again, which to me indicates that we're dealing with, when that happens, we're dealing with a vegan that the concern for the animals is fake,
Yeah,
not sincere.
crops grown and harvested for animal feed. And as you can clearly see in this map, most of the colors that you see on this map is green. That means most of the crops grown and harvested are for food, for human consumption. Okay? If what the vegans were saying was actually true, that most of the crops are grown for livestock, then this map here would be blue mostly, but it isn't. It's mostly green. So this already debunks what the vegans are saying. Again, when we focus on actually crops being grown and not inflate the numbers with pasture land and grazing land being thrown in there, right? Because if we talk about crop deaths, we don't talk about pasture land and grazing land because there is barely any pesticides being used on pasture land and grazing land. There's any barely synthetic fertilizers being used there. Okay. So most of the pesticides are for the crops, okay, for cultivated cropland. Most cultivated cropland is used for human consumption, as this map clearly shows. Okay, you can also see it in this graph here that the harvested hectare of land for human food is double that of animal feed crops. Okay, double.
Okay, I wanted to look at this a little bit closer. So this is related to that previous graph that we saw or map.
Yeah.
This green line here, these are food crops, and then this blue line here is feed crops. So this is a line graph representation of the hectares that were represented on the previous map, correct?
Correct. Yeah, pretty much. And
Yes.
I mean, this is And harvested hectare of land is the correct metric to use when we talk about crop deaths, because there are also some other metrics and some other graphs there, like calories and all of that, but this is irrelevant. This is totally irrelevant. We're talking about hectares of land being sprayed with pesticides and being harvested and being used for food production that kill animals in the process. So we're not talking about weight or calories. This is total irrelevancy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A calorie is a unit measure of heat.
Yeah.
And has absolutely nothing to do with human nutrition. In fact, at least here in the United States today, people are getting too many calories right now and not enough of the essential nutrients that are required for, optimal human health.
Yeah, this is also something that I actually wanted to show, or that this is also something I will talk about in the response to debug your brain, because vegans are again saying that the animal agriculture is inefficient because we are losing so many calories that we could consume, so many heat units, so many photons that we are losing, but we're gaining actually vitamin B12, heme, iron, zinc, and all the other nutrients and high quality protein. But we're
Right.
losing the heat units. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. You never hear about, vegans really focusing on the essential and conditionally essential nutrients that are required for optimal human health. They're always talking about these calories because they know that if they move beyond calories, then they've got to explain, how they're going to industrially produce all of the B12 and creatine and vitamin D and all of these nutrients that are completely missing from a vegan diet.
Yes, and it also destroys the environmental arguments actually, because those nutrients have to be replaced, and this high quality protein has to be replaced. And in order to replace that, you have to actually grow more food. But we'll get to that later. We want to talk about that later.
Okay.
As you can clearly see, the green color and the blue color. Okay. Harvested hectare of land again is the accurate criteria if we are talking about crop deaths. Okay, because these pesticides, they're being sprayed on the harvested hectare of land. Okay, so counting in talking about calories or anything like that, or weight, doesn't make any sense in that regard. And again, most of what the animals eat is actually grass and leaves, as this graph shows. Okay, so and byproducts and crop residues and stuff like that. Okay, and you can clearly see in regards to soybeans, because vegans are obsessed with soybeans and whether or not soybeans are driven by livestock or by oil. To me, this is really irrelevant, because as you can see in this graph, oilseed cakes, meaning soybean meal, for example, is only 5% of what livestock is eating. Okay. Can you pause on that real quick?
Yeah.
Most of what's because I actually this video was before I actually found out that the oil was really the driving force behind soybean production, or
Right.
where I have like
You have
100%
that
clarity on that.
correct.
But I even found additional evidence that I want to show today that this is really so.
Okay. Great. Yeah, and it really illustrates also the vegan lie, which is also basically the vegan lies have first been formulated by corporations like Bayer Monsanto, where they will, in the World Economic Forum, they'll say, well, if, just like Earthling Ed says, if you've got a problem with all of the destruction and death caused by the soybean industry, then why would you continue to be a patron to the industry that's consuming up to 80% of all the soybeans that are produced, which is a lie, right? That's one of the half-truths that you were talking about earlier, which is they don't tell people that 100% of the soybeans are processed to extract the oil. And by weight, each soybean is about 80% meal, which is inedible for human beings, and 20% oil, which is 100% consumed by human beings, either as cooking oil, processed food ingredient, or raw material to make biodiesel, which is consumed by human beings in their vehicles.
Yes. Yeah, the meal is basically just a byproduct of the oil extraction or process of the crushing. And the crushing is why soybeans are cultivated. And the product of the crushing is the oil and the meal. So we have to figure out which is more profitable. Is it the meal or is it the oil?
Mhm.
And as I will show later, the oil is consistently over years and years priced higher than the meal.
Mhm.
So if 1 unit of oil and 1 unit of meal are both sold, then the oil is going to generate a higher profit margin.
Mhm.
And they're not wasting any oil. They're going to sell that oil. So
Right. And I have actually discovered that the soybean industry is purposefully misleading people and purposefully misrepresenting the facts in favor of the faulty and lying vegan narrative, because they know that if people realized the truth, that industry would be in peril, because
oh wow.
the soybean industry is going to thrive in a vegan mandate, a global vegan mandate. The soybean industry stands to gain trillions and trillions of dollars, and they want a vegan world. I mean, who wouldn't? If the pharmaceutical and food industries have merged into one entity now, and they're basically looking to make money, milk us for cash from cradle to grave. And that's why they're the way that they, if I'm sure that you probably learned a lot about the soybean industry by, like me, researching the financials, as far as like the market financials, looking at market industry predictions. It's all about, they're all excited about, the rise of veganism. And it doesn't matter
Yeah.
whether it's the soybean industry or the fertilizer industry or the toxic agrochemical industry. They're all just sitting on the edge of their seats for the world to become vegan, because they know, along with the drug companies, that they're standing to make a killing.
Yeah,
Literally.
exactly. Yeah, the whole conflict of interest of veganism is a whole topic in itself. But one thing about the soybeans that go actually into beef, for example, versus into these fake vegan meat, so-called meats, cell cultured
Animals
meat,
being
and
expressed.
this other plant-based meat, they actually use more soy than, and a university report actually came out, they use more units of soy in those fake meats than in beef. So of
Mhm.
course the vegans are helping the soybean market rise. This is very clear.
Yeah.
And also all the animal fats, all the butter, this has to be replaced, and they're going to replace it with vegetable oil, seed oils, all that nonsense.
Yeah. That's good.
Leaves and stuff that humans cannot eat. Okay, like byproducts from and crop residues, leftovers, waste products. Okay, so yeah, with all this already, with this map and with this graph, it's already debunked this nonsense that most crops are grown for animals. Okay,
Call him Jimmy. I'm going to call him the Jimster. Okay, that's what I'm going to go for
I
today's
prefer
stream.
garbage farms.
Garbage farms also works. So here's what
I
he
might switch
thinks.
it up.
Is what he thinks of
can jump between the two
vegans. Oh shit, that's tiny. How do I make that bigger? There we go. That's what she said.